As we explore the history of the whole world, you'll learn why this ancient comb has our alphabet on it. You'll meet a man who measured the earth more than 2,000 years ago, and you'll find out why this guy killed more people than Hitler. Our journey begins with the first civilizations which people built between these two rivers in Iraq. In the middle of each city, they built a pyramid-shaped tower where priests did strange stuff. Look, up there! Where? Up there. See those 4 stars? That's a rectangle. Imagine it has 4 legs and a head. Looks more like a Big Dipper full of... Hey, did you give the gods their drink offering yet? Yeah, but they haven't taken a sip. I'm sure it will be gone by morning. Go get some rest. The ancient Sumerians divided days into hours, minutes, and seconds, and they also invented writing. Then one king had an idea. Look at this mess. Every city has its own king. How inefficient. Oh great Sargon, what solution do you propose for the benefit of the people? Benefit of the people? Kings don't rule for the benefit of the people. We rule to increase our pride, power, and possessions. Sargon conquered the other cities and built the first empire. And around the same time, the Egyptians were building pyramids, and the Minoans were painting pictures. And over in the Indus River Valley, people built organized cities with straight roads, and they wrote stuff that no one knows how to read, but if you can read it, this guy will give you $1 million. Then Hammurabi wrote some laws on this rock before other ancient cultures appeared, like all these. And some of them even spoke languages related to English. But for some mysterious reason, all these empires started falling apart at about the same time, and bronze was also going out of fashion because it was time for the Iron Age. Over here, a guy named Abraham had a son who was the ancestor of the Arabs of Central Arabia. And he also had another son who had another son who had 12 sons who were called the Israelites. And they went down to Egypt and became slaves, and then a guy named Moses told them that slavery wasn't cool. So they left Egypt and went to a mountain where their God gave them 10 commandments. And then they conquered some of the Canaanites, and later a king named David conquered everybody except for the Phoenicians, who built ships and sailed everywhere and built cities and wrote stuff with a really cool alphabet. Nice pictures. These are more than pictures, they are words. Look, our word for ox is Aleph, which starts with the sound ah. Our word for house is Beit, which starts with ba. Put those sounds together and you get ab, which means father. Alphabet, you're a genius. The Canaanites actually started using an alphabet more than 3,500 years ago, as you can see from this ancient lice comb, and it was such a good idea that everyone copied it. And guess what? The Assyrians are back and they just conquered everyone everywhere, except Jerusalem. Oh wait, now the Babylonians have conquered the Assyrians. And who's that? Cyrus the Great? He just conquered the Medes, Babylonians, and Lydians. And at the same time, some people in the East were teaching some new ideas. In the area the Greeks called Indike, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama saw people who were sick and dying, so he became a monk to find out how to escape from suffering. After he moved south and almost starved himself to death, he decided to eat a nice meal, and as he sat under a tree, he became enlightened. Want a different philosophy? Over in China, Confucius taught people to be nice, rule well, and be less confused, while Lao Tzu taught people to go with the flow. If that's too mystical for you, check out the Greeks, who are playing sports at the Olympics every 4 years in honor of their god Zeus. But right after the people of Athens invented democracy, they made the Persians mad. Who burned our beautiful city of Sardis? The Athenians. And whose city are we going to burn? What did you say? Sir, are we going to burn Sardis again? No, you fool, we're going to burn Athens. The Persians got slaughtered by the Athenians at Marathon, so they had to come back later to burn Athens. Then Herodotus wrote history and the Greeks did lots of thinking, especially Socrates, who taught Plato, who wrote about philosophy, and taught Aristotle, who taught Alexander the Great, who took revenge on the Persians and conquered the world and decided he was a god. And then he died, so he probably wasn't a god. So who should rule the world now? Me, said all of Alexander's generals. So they fought each other and divided the empire. Then a Greek guy in Egypt used shadows and geometry to measure the circumference of the earth. But some of the Greeks weren't so bright, like this king. Hey everyone, so I'm actually Zeus, so everyone has to worship me now, okay? Sure, okay, why not? Excuse me, I'm a Jew and we don't worship Zeus. Listen man, if you don't worship me, I'll make you eat a ham sandwich. The Jews told the king no thanks and made their own nation again. And guess who's coming to conquer the Greeks? If you guessed the Romans, you're half right. The Parthians started taking everything in the east and the Romans were expanding in the west, and they got in a fight with the Phoenicians from Carthage, who were also expanding, and Hannibal showed up in Italy with elephants that smashed the Romans. But the Romans won anyway, and leaders like Julius Caesar and Pompey conquered more lands, and they also fought each other, and Caesar won. Caesar also made our calendar, but he added too many leap years. Soon there was another civil war, but Mark Antony and his wife Cleopatra killed themselves, and Augustus Caesar ruled everything and was the first emperor of the Roman Empire. But then a guy named Jesus said he was the anointed king, so the Romans crucified him, but 3 days later his body was missing and his followers said they saw him alive. A guy named Paul started killing the Christians, but then he saw Jesus too, so he traveled everywhere spreading Christianity. Then the Jews tried to make their own nation again, so the Romans outlawed the Jewish religion. That scared the Christians, so they stopped doing anything that looked Jewish. But the Romans crucified them anyway and burned them alive and fed them to lions. So you're saying if I become a Christian, I'll die a horrible death? It's quite likely. How can I join? All those persecutions made Christianity even more popular, so Diocletian decided to outlaw Christianity and kill anyone who wouldn't worship the Roman gods. But then Constantine took over and he said he was cool with Christianity. But when the Christians kept arguing, he said, "Hey guys, why don't you all get together and decide what you believe?" So they did that, and finally everyone believed the same thing, except those who didn't. Then someone divided the empire in half, and to confuse everyone, we'll call this half the Byzantine Empire. And by the way, the Sasanians overthrew the Parthians, and the Huns are moving into Europe, and they're pushing the Germanic tribes into the Western Roman Empire. What are those dirty barbarians doing here in Rome? Excuse us, we are looking for souvenirs to take back to North Africa, like your wife's gold necklace. It's not for sale. That's good, cause we don't want to buy it. Some of the Germans called Vandals vandalized Rome, and others came to stay and conquer. But since they were in Rome, they did as the Romans, so the Western Empire isn't as dead as it looks. Now let's go to Asia. Can you guess where everyone came from? The Vietnamese, Cambodians, and other Austroasiatic peoples probably came from the north. The Filipinos, Indonesians, and other Austronesians sailed from island to island, eventually reaching Madagascar, Hawaii, and even New Zealand. Back in China, there were lots of kingdoms like the Shang and the Zhou dynasties, and the Qin and the Han, and the Jin and the Tang, and sometimes there's only one China, and sometimes there's 2 or 3 or 16 Chinas, and sometimes they build walls to keep people out. Actually, the wall was my idea. The Chinese also invented paper and printing, and they were the first to use toilet paper too. The Romans wiped with sponges on sticks, the Greeks used broken clay pots, and everyone else used whatever was available. Actually, we used water. Anyway, as the Chinese expanded, the Burmese, Thai, and other tribes moved into Southeast Asia, eventually overthrowing the Mon and Khmer kingdoms, and the Vietnamese also expanded south. Down in South Asia, 3 things were happening that would shape the region to this day. First, people started reciting mantras that are still used today. Second, India was unified when the Nanda Empire was conquered by the Maurya Empire, which was enlarged by King Ashoka, who conquered most of modern India except the Tamil kingdoms. When he was done killing people, he became a Buddhist and sent missionaries to spread Buddhism everywhere, so everyone would stop killing people. Then the Satavahanas killed some people. Up in Central Asia, the Kushan Empire helped keep the Silk Road open, and the Gupta Empire brought a golden age to northern India until another group of Huns showed up. Hey Henny, that's not funny. The third lasting impact came as Indian teachers and traders spread Hinduism, Buddhism, and Indian culture throughout Southeast Asia, and Buddhism spread to China, Korea, and Japan. But an even bigger change was about to happen among the Arabs. Have you heard that poet Muhammad? I heard him say our gods are fake except Allah. If the pilgrims believe him, they will stop coming to Mecca to worship the idols, and business will suffer. We must defend the idols. Can't the idols defend themselves? How? They're made out of stones, you know. Arab clans had fought with each other for hundreds of years, but that all changed after Muhammad said he received revelations from the God of Abraham and united the Arabs under Islam. Since the Arabs weren't allowed to fight each other anymore, they fought everyone else, and soon they ruled an empire larger than any before. But the Muslims found a rival in Europe during the Middle Ages. As the Muslims were conquering Europe, they were stopped by the Franks, who were led by Charles the Hammer, who also had a grandson named Charles, who the Pope crowned as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which would last for 1,000 years, even though part of it broke off and became France. Over in the British Isles, some new tribes have moved in, and up north the Vikings have started stealing everybody's stuff and settling in Russia and England and Normandy and Iceland and Greenland too. Who named this place Greenland? What a scam! Chill out. One day, geopolitics is gonna make this place hot. Some Vikings even went to North America. Then the Vikings called Normans conquered the rest of England. And way over in Central Asia, the Turks established a Turkic Khaganate. What's a Khaganate? It's an empire with a Khagan who rules over the Khans. How do you know so much? I'm the goat. Many of the Khazars were Turks too, and so were the Uyghurs, and the Ghaznavids, and the Seljuks. The Seljuks converted to Islam and started conquering everyone, including the Byzantines. So the Orthodox Byzantines asked the Catholics for help, even though they had kind of broke up recently. So the Pope told Christians they could be forgiven for sin if they fought a holy war against the Muslims. So in crusade after crusade they plundered and killed in Christian love, and they established several states in the Holy Land that were later conquered by the Kurdish Sultan Saladin and the Mamluks. The Mamluks also stopped the Mongols from expanding southward. Wait, how did the Mongols get all the way over here? Aren't they supposed to be in Mongolia? No, said Genghis Khan after conquering twice as much land as Alexander the Great, and then the Mongols doubled their territory again, and they might have brought the Black Death to Europe too. Oops, at least a third of Europe just died. I guess it's time for a renaissance, and a printing press with movable type. What should we print? Bibles. Don't print them in Spanish. Why not? 'Cause we're having an inquisition. What are you inquiring about? We're checking to see if the Jewish Catholics are secretly keeping the Sabbath. And some of them were, so the Spanish burned the heretics, finished reconquering Spain from the Muslims, and kicked out the Jews and Muslims who wouldn't convert, just in time for the age of exploration. While the Portuguese were sailing around Africa to snag some spices, Columbus took a shortcut, sailed west and beat them to Asia. But this isn't Asia, said Amerigo, so everyone called it America. Native Americans actually came from Asia when the oceans were lower, or maybe they used boats. Some were hunters and gatherers, others were fishermen and farmers. And way down in Peru they built giant pyramids. Maybe they found the blueprints on the internet. The natives also built lots of empires, including the Incas and the Aztecs, who also liked building pyramids. What did they do up there? They sacrificed humans to feed their gods. Somebody should stop them. Somebody did. The Spanish came and saw and conquered the Aztecs and Incas and everyone else, even the Filipinos way over here, and converted them to Catholicism. The Spanish also made plans to conquer China, but they decided against it. Back in the Americas, the Spanish gathered lots of gold and silver and all kinds of interesting foods and took them back to Europe. Meanwhile, the Portuguese finished sailing to Asia and built a huge trading empire, bypassing the ancient Silk Road and spice routes. To avoid a fight, Spain and Portugal divided the world in half. Then some Portuguese traders sailed some ships full of stuff to Africa and traded it for slaves. And then they traded the slaves for food, and they traded the food for more stuff in Europe. Rinse and repeat. But back in Europe, there was a big fight about religion as the Reformation got underway. A German Catholic priest named Martin Luther started using the printing press to become the first mass media influencer and to protest against the Catholic Church. His fans started reading the Bible and joined the Protestant Reformation. Over in England, they were still burning Bibles, but King Henry VIII wanted a new wife, and the Pope said, "That's not legal." So he said, "I will make it legal," and England became Protestant. So he married this woman, but she didn't have a son either, so he cut off her head and married another, and another, and another, and another. And now England is ruled by his daughter Elizabeth, who loves pirates as long as they're robbing the Spanish. Then Pope Gregory fixed the calendar, but the Pope is the Antichrist, said the Protestants, so they didn't use the new calendar. All these disputes about religion resulted in the rise of northwestern Europe. Hey, the Dutch just broke free from Spain, and now they're dominating the seas, capturing the spice trade, and painting overpriced tulips, while English pirates are beating back a Spanish invasion and sailing to America. Then Europe had a daily discussion about which kind of Christianity is better. The new great powers all tried to colonize America, and they gave very creative names to their new colonies. But France and Britain couldn't agree on who and what. Then the argument turned into World War Zero. Yeah, hey, we beat the French, but now we're in debt. What should we do? Tax the Americans. The Americans didn't like the taxes, so they had a revolution, and France joined the fight against Britain. Yay, we beat the British! But now we're in debt. What should we do? Tax the people. The people didn't like the taxes, so they had a revolution, and then Napoleon seized power and conquered Europe, until Britain told him it was time to retire on an island. Now, everyone can have a revolution, said Simon Bolivar as he led revolution after revolution in Latin America. The British wanted to have a revolution too, but just an industrial one. So they started using steam power to make everything faster and cheaper. And now they need to sell this stuff somewhere. So they built the Second British Empire. Britain sent their criminals to establish Australia. Loyalists from the American colonies created Canada. And since the British controlled the seas, they outlawed seaborne slave trade for the whole world and sent freed slaves to start Sierra Leone. Meanwhile, the British East India Company was expanding in India. India had been divided into various kingdoms for more than 1,000 years, until the Mughals conquered most of India and built some fancy buildings. But as the Mughal Empire crumbled, the Marathas expanded from the west, and the East India Company expanded from the east until they controlled all of India. The East India Company was also selling opium from India to drug dealers in China, and when China told them to stop, the British Navy showed up and took Hong Kong. As Christian missionaries spread ideas in China, this guy had a dream and decided he was the brother of Jesus Christ. So he led a rebellion which left as many as 30 million dead. The United States was also growing in power, so they showed up in Japan and told them it was time to stop isolating themselves. Now let's look at Russia. How did it get so big? About 1,000 years earlier, some Vikings set up a kingdom over here, moved to Kiev, married local Slavs, converted to Christianity, and got conquered by the Mongols. Then the Byzantines got conquered by the Ottoman Turks, and the Russians unconquered themselves. Hey, Moscow, the second Rome has fallen. Wanna be the third Rome? Sure, said Ivan the Terrible. Call me Caesar, or Tsar for short. Then Russia got terribly bigger. In fact, the Russians even discovered Antarctica 3 days before the British. Bruh, you can't discover a continent that already has penguins living there. Hey Russia, let's play a game. It will be great. Just don't get involved in a land war in Asia. Hey, the Russians just started a land war in Asia and the Ottoman Turks need help. What a mess. I hope that won't ever happen again. Way over in the United States, the Americans were still isolating themselves, so they fought a war with themselves, and they also freed their slaves. Back in Europe, Italy just united, and Germany too, and they want some colonies just like the other cool kids. What can we colonize? I guess it's time to scramble for Africa. Wait, said Germany, we need the rules. First, you can't claim anything that's already claimed, and second, you can't claim anything you don't occupy. Bro, Africans already came and occupied the whole continent. Yes, but my cousin Darwin looked at some bird beaks and discovered that humans evolved from pond slime. So quite obviously, Europeans are the fittest to survive and rule over the world. It's science. Dude, if your brain evolved for survival, how can you trust it for truth? And you've forgotten the empires of Egypt and Kush, Aksum and Ethiopia, Numidia and Kanem-Bornu, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, the kingdoms of Benin, Oyo, and Ashanti, the traders on the Swahili coast and the builders of the great Zimbabwe, Motapa and Marapi, the kingdom of Congo, and the Zulus, and all the other African empires. But the race had already begun, so the Italians invaded and the Belgians butchered, the Germans set up new bases and the Portuguese held on to theirs, the French captured new colonies, and Britain became the biggest empire in history. And all this competition is taking the great powers down the path to war. The empires are all expanding, except the crumbling Ottoman Empire. And now there's nowhere left to expand except the crumbling Ottoman Empire. And now everyone's inventing crazy new technologies like telegraphs and telephones, airships and airplanes, battleships and submarines.